Hey everyone, this is Dana with the Wisdom Calls channel and what your pastor never told you.com, helping you to understand the Bible better so that you can have a better relationship with God. And welcome to my channel today. In just a few moments, I'm going to be sharing with you my exclusive interview with Jake McCandless, author of Spiritual Prepper. I do want to just let you guys know as a caveat that I had two cameras that were recording this interview, and the first camera, which was my phone, lost some of the footage. And so you might see us looking off towards the direction of my phone, but the footage that I have left is what I got from my computer. And so that's why we're not maybe looking directly at the camera for you, but I know that you're going to enjoy this interview very much. And so with that, we'll go ahead and roll the footage. Enjoy. Hey everyone, this is Dana Crosby with the Wisdom Calls channel and what your pastor never told you.com, helping you to understand the Bible better so that you can have a better relationship with God. And I'm on location in Nashville, Tennessee at the Understanding the Times Bible Prophecy Conference. And I have a special guest with me here right now. This is Jake McCandless, author of Spiritual Prepper and also prophecysimplified.com. Welcome. Thanks for being on the show.
Well, this is awesome.
Yeah. So I want to let my viewers know a little bit about your book that just came out. So can you tell us a little bit about the concept behind your book?
The concept is really remaining faithful is the big picture. But Matthew 24:10, which says many will turn away, and we look out right now, we've got 42 million Christians, professed Christians who have walked away from the faith in America.
Wow.
And so that's happening before we're even getting to the most difficult points. And so, this argues all the way through Matthew 24, beginning with persecution, and goes down the list of the different challenges we face, and just talks about remaining faithful in those challenges. And so if we prepare now for the spiritual disasters, we can remain faithful in the long run.
So here in America, we see a lot of people doing preparations for physical disasters, right? Preparing with generators for power outages or food supplies, different things like that. But tell us a little bit why it's more important or most important to be preparing spiritually.
In the process of writing the book, so it started with a different title and all this thing. So when I was working through it, I ended up on a marathon of National Geographic's Doomsday Preppers. And so this show where they bring in, it's a family that's prepping in some way, and they bring in somebody from the outside to grade them and how they're doing. And I watched this marathon. It's ridiculous. I sat through that. But watch this marathon, and so every 30 minutes they're preparing for something different. And it's just like, okay, someone's going to be wrong, for one. So that'd be a terrible thing to be wrong from. And then that verse in Matthew 10:28 where it says, do not worry about what's going to happen to the body, but what's going to happen to the body and soul. And so even if you got what's going to happen right as far as the physical prepping, and we're able to follow it through completely, the best you can do is add a few more years to your life. Versus, spiritually, we're talking about eternity. And I'm really focused on believers and encouraging them to remain faithful. Because I think, especially in this, we're happy to get to heaven by the skin of our teeth, which we only get to heaven by faith, nothing we do. But at the same time, God's called us to be faithful, and we should all want to hear, well done, my good and faithful servant. And so if we can persevere and hear that should be our hearts.
Yeah, that's absolutely the end goal. And I think that's what a bunch of us that have been reading about the scriptures, we see kind of the writing on the wall that things are coming to pass just as they were predicted. And so we have to believe all of what Jesus said. It's not just that he said, I'm coming back and I'm coming soon. He said that there were other things that were going to happen first. And one of the things that he said is this great falling away that Jake is mentioning to us. And so if he has warned us ahead of time that this is going to happen, what can we do to prepare our hearts to make sure it isn't us who is falling away? It isn't us who's turning away? How can we prepare our families? How can we prepare ourselves? So what are some things that we can do spiritually to get ready?
Well, one, realizing it could be you. Because I think the question when we hear, probably even listening as you're hearing this and watching, you're thinking, well, how stupid is that? I would never leave my faith. I wouldn't quit. But the word in Matthew 24, turn away, is the same word used in Matthew 26 as Jesus is with the disciples, the Last Supper, and he says, tonight, you're going to turn away.
Wow.
You're going to stumble away. And Peter says, not I, even if I have to die with you. So I think for all of us, we have this idea, okay, not me, it's not going to happen to me. Yet statistically, scripturally, it can. And also with that, I think in America, we don't have this idea of endurance or perseverance. If it gets hard, we jump ship. Versus, in other places, I know you probably have talked about, the persecution that goes on, that's the gatekeeper at the beginning. Somebody knows when they come to faith in Christ, they could die. So I think it begins with just realizing, one, your faithfulness matters, that it matters now, it's going to matter into eternity. Realize it's going to be challenged, and realize that you could be one of the ones that it's challenged. So I think really awareness. And so when I'm writing the book, I wanted awareness out there. And the publisher kept working with me. You get it more practical. I mean, it's a lot of practical things, but the practical things we're familiar with in a lot of ways, because, our Christian walk is is working towards faithfulness, but it's being intentionally, and that's what my message was, just a few minutes ago. So we're here at this conference. A lot of people are already tracking along these lines of what's coming prophetically. So how do we take that back to our churches and implement that? I think being intentional, that these things are going to happen, so we need to intentionally do things to repair, build up our faith, walk in the Spirit, know the truth, and so things like this, getting the truth out.
Yeah, and that awareness is so important, I think, because I think especially in America, we live in kind of denial. Like, we are in such a sheltered place that we live in denial that it could ever happen here. And so many people think, well, I'm going to be raptured out of here before there's any real testing or any real trial, and that's just, it's not biblical. And what's actually happening across the world is this fiery trial that so many brothers and sisters, and I've been posting about this, but you guys, we are facing, as Christians, we're facing more persecution right now in our generation than in any generation previous to this. And a lot of times we don't realize it because we're here in the United States. We have so many freedoms. We might only notice maybe Facebook bans you from doing something, but that is not like the persecution.
We're an anomaly in history, an anomaly in the world. And I think that's one of the things we prepare. How much is persecution talked about in the church? I mean, I think because what happened at the hands of ISIS, it's made its way into our churches. We need to do things like, celebrating the National Day of, praying for the persecuted church. And one of the best things we did, we had a church member who became a Voice of the Martyrs voice. And so her role was keep the church informed. And so we began, in our newsletter monthly, putting these stories out. And then she would do, give us updates. And so that kept this idea of persecution in front of the church. And, it's still a big jump to make it realize that could be you. But, I think we need to be doing those type things. Things that we're not teaching, we need to put in. Things that pastors are not saying, we need to say.
Yeah, absolutely. And, one of the things about this whole kind of denial, or maybe we think that we're in a special protected place. One of the speakers was talking today, and what came to my mind is the story of Esther. And even though Esther was Jewish, and so I'm talking about us maybe as not necessarily being Jewish, but Mordecai came to her and said, don't think that you're going to be spared by sitting here in the palace. Do not think that this is not going to come to you and touch you as well when this persecution was going to break out. And I feel like it's the same way. So just like during the Holocaust and Nazi Germany, even though there were some Christians that were very bold and were helping to rescue Jews, a lot of Christians did not. They stood by, and I think they were hoping for self-preservation. They're hoping, if I don't stick my neck out on the line for them, maybe someone will leave my family alone. And we need to not be about self-preservation really at this point. We need to realize that Satan hates the Jews, and he hates us too, because we're all children of the promise. We're all heirs of the promise. So when that persecution happens, we have to be willing to stick our necks out on the line, maybe do the dangerous things, because like you mentioned earlier, I mean, this life is just temporal, right? It's just short. And so we have to live for what's going to be eternal, those eternal things. So what can you say that would help believers here in the United States, besides awareness? What can we do to help protect ourselves from this falling away that's going to happen in the future?
Again, as we said, realize it's going to happen. I think the big thing is engaging yourself. I think one of the problems here in the Western church is we don't make our mission big enough. One of the coolest, I think it was in a Donald Miller book. He was visiting with a friend about their teenage daughter was going off the rails, getting into things she didn't need to get into, and so they're counseling. And Donald said, "Why don't you get her involved in? She needs to be involved in something bigger." And so that dad leaves that conversation, goes out and brings in this pamphlet that they're going to go in the mission field to somewhere in South America. They started an orphanage, and after a couple trips down there, getting the orphanage going, praying over it, raising money, that daughter, the father never even had to say anything about the boyfriend.
Wow.
She now had a bigger thing to live for.
Yeah.
And I think because even when ISIS was rolling strong here a couple of years ago, it was a phenomenon in Western countries, even in America, where you had young girls leaving to be brides of these, trying to sneak out of the country, trying to get there and be brides because they were painted a bigger picture of something exciting. Mm-hmm. And I think in America, we've just made Christianity get saved, come sit on a pew, listen to a sermon.
It's kind of boring. There's no big adventure.
Yeah. And so it should be brought into a bigger picture. And so I think that's a big part of it. What we've seen in this conference is they've talked a lot about what's going to happen to Israel and how we can actually play a role in helping them. But I think one of the things we're not talking about here is what's going to happen to America. Because America we push to be so centric, and we're not centric to the story. Mm-hmm. But if you look at what's going to happen in the end times, America has to diminish. Just at the best case scenario, we just have to diminish, and probably a bigger scenario than that. That changes our life. That changes the church, and so we need to embrace ourselves, for that, to realize, hey, America's not always going to be the way it is. Mm-hmm. So how did people remain faithful in the Great Depression? How did they remain faithful World War II? In these different time periods, as we may face things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think about that palace mentality, and it does feel like we're isolated, almost as though we're an island over here, because we've only got Canada to the north and South America, and then we're just separated from all of this by these oceans, and so we don't realize what's going on. And I love that example you gave about that daughter where she got engaged in something bigger than herself and missionally, just was thinking outside of herself. And it is so centric here in America. We're thinking about ourselves. But one of the things I will say, this conference has been life-changing. You watch these videos of these believers and they are living it every day. They are risking their lives, and they know that they're risking their lives, and they in some cases have the choice to leave, but they're choosing to stay and lay their life on the line. And it's been very challenging for me to watch that. But when you see the suffering, and you also see what happens when people are converted to Christ, and you see the transformation, it gets exciting. And then you're thinking, what can I do to help? How can I get in the game? Yeah. And if we're in the game and engaged in that way, we're going to be a lot less likely to fall away, because we've already counted the cost. Mm-hmm. We've already had the sacrifice. Another thing that I think is really important, and Christopher mentioned this, was fasting. That's something we can do as Christians here. We can fast and pray for believers over there. But in the act of fasting, we are diminishing ourselves. We're diminishing our fleshly nature. We are saying no to our fleshly desires, and we are putting the spiritual things above the fleshly things. So it's good practice to get in those things.
Yeah, Jesus says when you fast, and so it's expected in a sense. Yeah. But anyway, we can engage yourselves in the story. And of course, I'd love people watching to get spiritual prepper. But for some of the books I actually have just loved, Tom and Joanne Doyle are here, and he's got 3 books out: Standing in the Fire, Killing Christians, and Dreams and Visions. And so I'd heard about him, and he's a great storyteller. And so each of them walks through Christians being persecuted. And so I'd read a story a day, and I went on for a couple months. And I'd find myself, here were heroes of the faith, in Syria and other places. And I'm like, I just want to give them a hug, and I'm like crying, and, trying to tell everybody the stories. And there's one guy who kept popping up in all the stories, and we got to hear from him today. And one of the sessions he called in, phenomenal, is putting these people as heroes, recognizing that. I mean, they're giving everything. I mean, the story we heard today is this church in Syria decided to stay. These pastors decided to stay and serve instead of leave. And so they went out and bought a cemetery. So the first movement they had in their ministry was buy a cemetery, and so when they die for their faith, they can be buried together.
Isn't that amazing that the church's first building is a cemetery? That's saying we're willing. This is the extent that we're willing to go to. We're going to invest in this first, because if we get killed for our faith, they're not going to bury us. So we're going to build this building. Yeah. And, what a testimony.
I think David Platt talks about this in his book, Radical. He talks about this group, I think it's China or somewhere like that, where they would, before they left their village to go share, they would build a coffin, and they would carry their stuff in the coffin to this place because they knew they'd be killed for their faith.
Wow.
I mean, that's extremely engaged. So we need to start somewhere making the story bigger, because it's just easy to sit back. And unfortunately, I think we probably all are praying for revival, hoping for revival. I really think it will only come through fire, this time forward we talk awakening. But why do we have to wait to be just our finger pressed down when we've got freedom now to run with it, to go with it.
Right. And it's so exciting when you hear these testimonies of what's going in Iran and Israel as far as radical people getting radically saved, turning their life over. And they know when they do that they're putting everything on the line. From day one, they know their life is at risk, but they're doing it. But when you see this, it's like, for me, my eyes are getting open like, this is the end. This is end game time. You know what I mean? When you see this happening, it's like everything's coming down to the goal line.
It is, and so, some of the people here are, on the ground, which is what I love. They're teaching prophecy, teaching Islam will be the religion of the Antichrist, coming from the caliphate, and then at the same time just rejoicing over Muslims coming to Christ.
Yeah.
And so it's this beautiful picture of missions, because it is. I was preaching a seminar. I did a seminar called "The Good, Bad, and Ugly of the End Times," and so of course the bad being the persecution, the ugly. The bad was the growth of the caliphate, and the ugly, the persecution, and then the good was the spread of the gospel. And so I had these maps up, and midway during the message, I realized they're the same map. The map of the dream of the caliphate is the 1040 window. Where the unengaged people are is the 1040 window. Where the gospel's growing right now is the 1040 window. And it's just like I just stared at it. I'm like, it's just a beautiful collision course, and we're in it. And I think that's one of the things that I went to this conference when it was in Texas. I walked away just realizing, there's some great things to look forward to in the future.
Yeah, this is awesome. Well, I'm going to put links to the books that Jake mentioned as well as his book down below this video so that you guys, anyone that wants to pick up that book, I highly encourage you guys to do so. And then where can they find you on the internet?
We started a new ministry just 2 weeks in called standfirmministries.com. And the hope is to encourage Christians here to hold on to their faith and start the discussion there. If you hold on, if you stand firm, then that pushes, begins the process. And so we're sharing in churches. We do an event called a Stand Firm Emphasis Day. And so we as a church, set aside a Sunday, and they emphasize commitment. And then also prophecysimplified.com, because I know some of your followers track with prophecy. And so there's resources there for prophecy, kind of on a basic level, kind of starting level, I guess. Yeah,
and if you would like to have Jake come and speak at your church and you want to learn about standing firm in the end times, you can go to that Stand Firm website that he gave you. I'll put a link for that down below as well. You can have him come and speak at your church to help get you guys prepared.
Yeah.
So, well, thanks so much for coming on the show today. I appreciate it.
Thank you for what you do. This is awesome.
Yeah, thanks. All right, well, you guys have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.